Starting with the very classical slingshot. It is made out of steel, 1 centimeter in diameter. Pretty tough. Using 6 centimeter wide bands. Interesting slingshot. And I put rope around it for a grip. It has a ergonomical FIMO grip made for my hands, and it has balls at the tips for a better distribution of power at the tip of the fork. This one has 7 centimeter wide bands and is very, very strong. Because it has a draw length extension running over rollers. Those rollers have a steel core, and also I used the ball method to apply to attach the rubber. And it's a very, very strong slingshot too. As you can see, the length of the rubber in both slingshots is very comparable, but you have the advantage that there is no dead play in the new slingshot. So you see here, you start to pull against the resistance of the rubber here, at this point. And with the other slingshot, has about the same length of the rubber, you have a lot more dead play. And this dead play means that you lose power. That's why this slingshot is definitely more powerful than this one. Hello, today we're going to build a slingshot that is just made for one thing: power, pure power. We don't care what it's going to look like, we don't care how hard it is to shoot it, we just want power. And this is a how-to video, so at the end of the video I will show you in great detail how to make it at home. You don't need any welding equipment or something for it. But I think it has a rugged, talks business-like design. So I think it's not ugly, it's just effective. This is what we need to make the slingshot. A piece of round wood for the grip, a length of rectangular pipe, steel, a threaded rod that's M12, 12 millimeter, could also be ½ inch, and a piece of aluminium tube that needs to fit snugly over the threaded rod. The tighter it fits over it, the better. Okay, some epoxy glue, like 2 component, a drill, 12 millimeter or ½ inch if you're using ½ inch threaded rods. 6 washers and 6 hex nuts fitting for the M12 or ½ inch threaded steel rod. So now we need 3 holes clean through this steel tube and set these 7 centimeters apart. So that is the way how it's supposed to look like now. Next you cut off a 12 centimeter piece of the wood and you drill a 12 millimeter hole about 10 to 11 centimeters in. Make sure it's as perfectly centered as possible. Although it's not so bad if it's a little off, it doesn't matter. Next you saw off a piece of the threaded rod and then you mount it in the middle of the tube. Make sure you really tighten these nuts. And the leftover part should be as long as the hole in the wooden grip. So this is how the grip now fits over the bolt, and we're going to glue it in place later on. Next, you cut off 2 more parts of the threaded rod and make sure that it is exactly 2.5 centimeters, like 1 inch above the end of the grip. Make sure they have the same length. This is actually a good way of checking. Next, cut off 2 parts from the aluminum tube and make sure that they're about flush with the end of the threaded bots. Next, smear the epoxy glue onto the threads. Make sure that you got enough of it. Okay, then push the rods and the tubes together and put the grip on. So the glue has dried and everything is really solid now. Make sure that the tips are really well rounded, because this is going to be an over-the-top shooter, and if it's not round enough it will cut the rubber. So we cleaned off all the excess metal and also polished it a little bit so it looks a little bit nice. The frame is now finished and it's time to attach the rubber. We start with cutting off a strip of leather and then punching 3 holes inside. 2 at the sides and 1 in the middle. And cut it into 25 centimeter long stripes. You need 2 if you're an average person, and you need 4 of them if you're strong like me. The stronger the better. Use a roll cutter for that, because with the scissor it's not going to work. Next, cut them lengthwise. Leave them at the full width at the fork side and cut them to just 6 centimeter at the pouch side. This is an extreme tapering and it is going to shorten the band lifetime, but remember, we are on the hunt for power, not for compromise. Okay, then you take the rubber and you fold it 2 times until it looks like this. You take the slingshot and you put it over the fork about 2.5 centimeters, like this. And then you take a rubber band, that could be like office rubber, could also be a strip of Theobrand gold or so, and you start wrapping it around, always pulling it very tightly, like this, and then you wrap it. And then you take the pliers and you wind it around the pliers twice. 1 and 2. And then you force open the pliers, like this. And you put the end of the rubber band between the pliers. And then you slip this through, like this. So now we want to attach the pouch to the leather, just like this. See, it's just put through, stretched a little bit, and then tied with very thin, tough string. Okay. Now we cut off the excess bands and rubber. Please stretch the rubber a few times.
Made some copies to use them as templates. I'm sticking the templates onto a piece of 5mm aluminum. Drill the required holes and then start to cut them out. After drilling holes all around our pieces, it's actually really easy to break them free. However, it can help to saw some of these connections apart before breaking the parts free. Now we need to do quite a bit of filing and smoothing and polishing. You want to take great care that the area that will later on touch the string is really polished to a high shine. For the main body of the pistol I use pre-milled hardwood from the hardware store. I'm using the router table to create a slot that will accommodate our trigger parts. Now routing the groove that will guide the arrow. Now I'm changing to a chamfer bit to knock off the edge so it won't eventually damage the string. Now I'm creating a notch that will later on fit our crosspiece, or like the bow on a normal crossbow. This is the trigger assembly. I am carefully marking where I have to drill holes for the pins. Now cutting some 6mm aluminum tubing to the right length. But heck, the pins do not fit. I had to create a reamer out of another section of the same kind of tubing and ream out both holes. I also had to file the holes in our trigger parts just a little bigger. And now everything fits. Here you can already see how the trigger is going to work. For the part that will hold our pulleys, I'm gluing together two pieces of wood, and then I'll stick on my template and cut it out on the bandsaw. And again, chamfering the edges on the router table. Yummy! I'm using construction adhesive to glue both of the wooden parts together. Now shaping the scope mount. Again sticking on the template and cutting it out on the bandsaw. I have attached it to the crossbow with a single screw. I've cut out the arrow clasp on the bandsaw and now glue it to our scope mount. It's important to make any adjustments before the glue hardens. And then add a little more glue to secure it in place. I've prepared those two bolts which will hold our pulleys securely in place. The pulleys have to be freely rotating, of course. I cut the pistol grip on the bandsaw and then rounded over all the edges on the router table. I also had to create a little slot which will accommodate the trigger. Now I'm finishing all the parts with some coats of spray lacquer. I've bent the trigger spring out of piano wire and now fit it to the handle. Now applying plenty of glue, and then comes the moment of truth. And it still works. Yes! The last step, which is totally optional, is to shape the upper part of our scope mount like a 22mm Picatinny rail, so that we can mount our red dot sight. The very last step is to screw 2 ring screws into the rear of the crossbow and then attach the rubber tubing. Okay, that's it.